Prime Minister Carney's well-crafted and eloquently delivered speech at Davos has been widely noted, and I want to start by offering my own praise. What stood out most to me was when he pointed out, quote, the gaps between rhetoric and reality. That's especially true here at home. If liberal words and good intentions were tradable commodities, Canada would already be the richest nation on earth.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre there responding to the Prime Minister's Davos speech in that clip. He's set to face the biggest test yet to his leadership this week. Party members will decide on Friday whether Poilievre stays or goes as leader. How will he fare at the convention vote in Calgary? I spoke with Shachi Kurl, president of the Angus Reid Institute, and Abacus Data's CEO David Coletto a little earlier. Hi, Shachi. Hi, David. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate you making the time.
Hey there.
Shachi. Shachi, I'll start with you. Before we get into like the sort of mechanics of the party itself and Conservative supporters, top line numbers, what are you seeing in the electorate right now for the Conservatives versus the Liberals and Poilievre versus Carney?
So right now, I mean, the Conservatives, and we'll have new numbers early next week, but, you know, they are holding their own within a couple of points of the Liberals, sometimes a statistical tie. So, you know, when we talk about the challenges for Pierre Poilievre, you know, certainly Conservatives will push back and point out, well, if we were doing so badly, you know, why are we in very good competitive situation with the Liberals? But that doesn't account for the fact that it's still not enough mathematically in terms of percentage of popular vote or the number of seats they return to Parliament to be in a position to form a majority, and that anybody but conservative sentiment continues to prevail. In the era of Donald Trump, you will find Bloc voters, NDP voters, even Green voters who may hold their noses and vote for the Liberals because the narrative or the perception of Poilievre, you know, sort of being too close to that right-wing side of politics, too close to Trumpian politics, has been just absolutely toxic for him. It's been kryptonite. And you also start to see, Vashi, some wobbles and some doubts among past Conservative voters. So when we talk to people who voted Conservative just about a year ago in that 2025 spring election, only about 60% of those voters, and important distinction, those aren't paid-up Conservative Party members, they're people who voted, who now say, only about 58%, 60% basically say Poilievre should stay. About a quarter of them think he should go. So that is the concern, you know, in terms of the broad electorate. What the party thinks of him, what his true faithful grassroots members think of him, obviously another story.
And David, you've done a deep dive into those numbers as well. How would you explain sort of the different factions that make up a Poilievre supporter base?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at what we call the conservative base, right? Those would be people who say, I'm not going to vote for any other party. It's conservative or nothing. They represent about 1 in 4 Canadians. So it's a substantial number that make up its base. It's always had that. It's always had the advantage of a really high floor, and it's larger than the Liberals or the New Democrats or any other party. But the problem is, as Shachi just highlighted, the ceiling is also quite low. But if you look at those who are in that base, not only do they really like Pierre Poilievre, in fact, they tell us they trust him far more than they do even Stephen Harper or Doug Ford or Danielle Smith, but they actually think overwhelmingly that he makes the party more electable, right? And so that's, I think, a really important point about his relationship with that base. They agree with him in not just his tone. They want more confrontation. They think the system is rigged against them. They think, you know, the media is not reporting anything fairly. They have deep suspicions around a lot of public institutions. And yet, almost every other Canadian disagrees with that perspective. And that's the paradox facing Poilievre's leadership, in that at once he is likely going to do very, very well next weekend. But at the same time, the more that people learn that, the more they might be off-putting for the exact reason that Shachi said at the beginning around the connection with Trump.
There's this weird thing sometimes in politics, and the three of us have talked about this before, but Shachi, where something feels really inevitable or really certain, and then all of a sudden it isn't. And I've covered lots of stuff like that, and I feel like it's almost impossible for Mr. Poilievre not to do well in this leadership review, given the support, as David mentions, he does have among the base of the party. Is there a world in which that's not going to happen? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
My God, it would be breathtaking, right? Like, it would be a jaw-dropping moment if we didn't see what the political class, or however we want to describe ourselves, view as him not receiving a threshold high enough to continue. Because we have to remember, this is, as David's pointed out, Poilievre's party. The guy won the leadership with what, like 90% of the vote? So you would have to see a tremendous amount of defection from, you know, a near unanimous endorsement from him when he took the leadership. And when we've asked Conservatives in the past to kind of debrief and reflect on what went wrong in the last election, you know, who do you blame? Conservative voters at that time, and those diehards that David was talking about, but even those who cast let's call it a warm or a friendly vote, if not you know, a death do us part loyalty vote, they didn't blame Poilievre. They blamed Trump. They blamed Carney. They blamed circumstances. But they didn't blame the leader's approach in that last campaign, which arguably cost him the election. So to see a level of defection that really calls his leadership into question, I do think would be, you know, we can all doubt ourselves and, you know, talk to me in the wee hours, I guess, over the weekend morning to find out where things are at. But it would be, I think, a really gobsmacking moment if he didn't have it. The other piece of it is, at least publicly, and yes, there have been floor crossings, and yes, there have been sotto voce grumblings about, you know, from within Conservative ranks, but you don't right now see an alternative. And I find that, you know, for people to defect or to go somewhere else, it's not just, should Poilievre stay or go? It's, what's my alternative? And that alternative piece, you're not seeing or hearing within the ranks of the party or the caucus.
It feels like a very unique situation, David, in that, and I could be misinterpreting this, but in that, like, I do feel as though Mr. Poilievre's leadership of the party has taken the base and the size of the scope of the level of support for the party to new heights. At the same time, among the rest of the electorate, it does feel like that same leadership that is such a benefit to the party in some ways is a real detriment in others.
It is, and let's be clear. Historically, that's been a problem for conservative, particularly at the national level, conservative leaders, right, who have always had a difficult time expanding beyond a certain number. Even Stephen Harper did. There was you know, he hit 41 and he could not break past that when he won his majority. The problem is that in the current context, where we have more or less a 2.5 party system with the Bloc in Quebec, but really two parties outside of it, means that's not enough. It's not enough to have assembled a coalition that's larger maybe than you've ever been able to do, as long as, one, you've got a stronger Liberal Party, and two, that Poilievre is so off-putting to so many more people that you may be inclined to vote NDP or Green or Bloc, but you're going to actually say, you know what? No way. I'm going to go and vote Liberal just to stop this guy. And so that's the fundamental problem. And I agree. I'm not sure there's someone who at once can both speak to the base of the party and also grow it, right? I don't believe that if Jean Charest was leader of the Conservative Party today, that one, they would have won the last election, or two, that they'd be in any stronger position, because about a quarter of the Conservative base would look at Mr. Charest and say, you're the exact problem that I want to see blown up and seen broken down and seen changed. And so this is the challenge that I think is not going to go away if you replace Pierre Poilievre. It's going to continue because of what I call the opinion architecture of the Conservative movement in Canada right now.
I'm going to have to leave it on that note. Guys, thanks for the analysis. Great to see you both. Appreciate it. Shachi Kurl and David Coletto.